meeting to order. This is the meeting of the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors. This meeting has been properly noticed, and we are assembled. It is my pleasure to welcome to the podium Pastor Tim Sackett. Tim is with the Transport for Christ, and Pastor Sackett will favor us with our invocation this morning. All rise.
Kind of surprised. I thought you did roll call first. Kind of surprised. Good morning, everybody. Don't let the crutches fool you. I'm still a very healthy person. Just had an accident in my driveway, so it wasn't on public property. So we're all okay here. We're all right, right? So thank you for this opportunity. As always, representing Hudson and St. Croix County clergy at this time is really important to us. It's a great privilege, and we're always thankful and appreciative of this opportunity. I just want to get one thing out there for you for right now. We still plan to do the National Day of Prayer on the first Thursday in May, which is May 1st. So most of you, or all of you, I should say, will be getting some notices very soon. I hope we're organized enough to do that. So the first Thursday of May is National Day of Prayer, and we will still honor that here in Hudson. In coming to these meetings like this, there's really nothing in the Bible that I just say, okay, this is the right thing to say at the right time to such a diverse group of people from different denominations and from different backgrounds, and where you've come to faith and whether you haven't come to faith. There's just nothing that I've ever really said, no, this is the proper thing to say at the proper time. But what I really think is proper is to always recognize that the greatness of our nation and the greatness of who we are as a nation has always been founded on very biblical, strong moral principles of right and wrong and self-government and all the things that we've come to believe about what we do, why we do. And the church in itself has a government system of leadership and responsibility and people submitting to authority. And so as clergy and as government leaders, I know we all share a sense of that responsibility of keeping ourselves within the laws and within the moral base of who we are and what we know is right and wrong, and then try to live that and then try to project that out to others. And I think Jesus himself bore that burden very, very well. So he's a great model of a great leader. Let's pray. Father God in heaven, you have given us a responsibility and a privilege to lead and to decide, to project the things about life in this society, in America, in Wisconsin, and in St. Croix County, of how we live with one another, and how we see our society laid out for us as leaders to live within the principles of the laws that we have, and to make such laws and to abide by such laws is a great responsibility individually, and as these Board of Supervisors bear that responsibility as well. Lord, I'm thankful and grateful that we have this time together. I just pray for each one here today among the county board supervisors and the audience in attendance, for everyone who has a leadership responsibility, for everyone who is making decisions for others, that they would first make the decision about themselves as to who they are and how they will live out their life and how they will interact with others. Lord, your disciples took that responsibility, and they were great leaders, and they showed us what it meant to be leaders, but also to submit to the authority that God is in charge of everything. So we thank you for those models that we have. Father, I pray that you would bless this meeting today, that you would be in attendance with us, and so carry out the business of leading this county in all areas of their responsibility and their duties. We want to ask for peace and contentment. We want to ask for wisdom and strength and courage in difficult and unbalanced days of what it means to carry out the laws of this land. We want to give you this day and give you thanks for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, Tim. Board members, would you indicate your attendance, please, for the record?
Make sure everybody made it in.
A quorum has been established, and we are properly convened. We do have notice from a number of the absentees this morning. A couple I do not have notice from, so perhaps a couple more will be arriving, but a quorum has been established. The consent agenda is in front of you. There are several items on that consent agenda. First of all, we are announcing the date of the, I guess that's second of all. First of all are the minutes from our last board meeting, which was held on 7 January. Those meeting minutes have been distributed for your prior review. The date of the next meeting will be our organizational meeting. As statutorily required, this will be the third Tuesday in April. So be advised, those of us that will be back, some of us may be back, some of us may not be back, but for those that are, the next board meeting is not the first Tuesday of the month, it will be the third Tuesday of the month, and that will in fact be the organizational meeting. We have also on the consent agenda some technical rezoning situations. The first one concerns some amendments to the County Code of Ordinances, the Land Use and Development Chapter 17, and this concerns a specific rezoning situation in the town of Erin Prairie. We also have some amendments to the St. Croix County zoning ordinance. The same situation, Chapter 17, and this concerns some zoning in the town of Troy. Chair would entertain a motion on the consent agenda. Motion from Peavy, second from Malick. Proceed to vote.
Just a second. The second in, please. Please press your second button.
Are you ready, Madam Clerk?
No, I need books.
Proceed to vote on the consent agenda.
That's unanimous.
And the consent agenda is adopted unanimously. Concerning the regular agenda, it is my intention to proceed with the agenda items in the order in which they are presented. There is a report that has been distributed that is simply an opinion that is going to be noted under the announcements. I want to make sure that you are in fact using the most recent agenda. The preliminary agenda as distributed was modified and amended, and you should have a revised agenda. The revision simply removed one agenda item. The item dealing with the resolution concerning the consultant's report on the dispatch center was in fact removed. That is not an action item in front of us today. As you recall, the consultant did present a lengthy report to the Committee of the Whole. Public Protection Committee did have a special meeting following that to discuss that resolution. They were unable to come to a decision, so they have at this point scheduled yet another special meeting and will take that up. Unfortunately, that has the practical effect of meaning that this board will not be dealing with that item. That will roll to a new board, but that is not an item that is in front of us today. At this point, we have a section on the agenda for public comment. If there's anyone here today that wishes to speak to the board on any item that is not on our agenda today, and I stress not on our agenda, so that we do not have any violation of open meeting laws, anything that is on the mind of anyone in the audience today, now is your opportunity. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to the board on any matter? And seeing no one rushing forward, I take that as an indication that there is no one wanting to address the board. Presentations and recognitions, we do have a couple of items. First of all, we have, and has that been loaded?
I don't see, is anybody here from the city?
I don't see Julie.
I don't see Julie or Scott.
No?
We had scheduled, as you will recall, somewhat similar to last year, a presentation from the city of River Falls. They had indicated that they would have a very brief video presentation and some comments concerning the city. I do not see either Julie or Scott, so for some reason our meeting is moving along more expeditiously than I had originally intended. The next item concerns a proclamation, and a copy of that proclamation was in the legislative pack that was distributed. This is a proclamation that will go out over my signature, and it simply indicates that I am proclaiming on basis of my authority as county board chair next month as County Government Month. Counties around the United States, in cooperation with the National Association of Counties, next month will recognize County Government Month, so April in St. Croix County will be proclaimed County Government Month. This proclamation will be distributed with an appropriate news release later this month to all the media. And one of the indications in there, as you can see, is that we are also announcing, as part of County Government Month, an open house for our dispatch center. The expansion and the remodeling and the new facilities that we have here in our facility will host an open house on the 15th of April. And with that, we will move right into our county administrator's report.
Did you mention April 15th?
I did.
To Scott. Okay.
I did. But you can repeat it.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I was conferring with Scott on an issue, and I asked the chairman if he had mentioned that the open house is April 15th, and he said he did.
What that really means is the administrator was not paying any attention to what I was saying, but I get that a lot.
No. Actually, I was asking Scott about something that I was talking to Supervisor Peavy and Supervisor Russet about before the meeting, and we were talking about the likelihood of some turnover on the board, and that we have 16 of 19 seats. Potentially, you could have all 19, I guess, and the question was being discussed, is that a state statute or is that local concern if the board were to decide to stagger terms and have, staggered terms for election? And I thought it was a state statute, but our Smart Corporation Council corrected me and said that it's up to.
It's possible that perhaps. I said that I thought it may be possible for the county board to opt out of that and create staggered terms.
Yeah. So it was interesting. Maybe for future discussion. Anyway, let's see. I have a report and it's all fired up and ready to go. Pardon? No. Well, Tabitha's here for the financial report. Are there any questions? The report was in your packet. Hadn't planned on saying anything on that. Tabitha, any issues you want to point out, or if there are any questions? Okay, thank you. My report this morning is brief. We're going to spend a little bit of time looking back. This is the last meeting of this board, and the elections are in April. We have an organizational meeting April 10th at 5 o'clock. That should all be on your schedules, and I think Liz sent out a save the date card. And that's a 5 o'clock start time, April 10th. And then our first meeting, organizational meeting, is the 15th. So this is our, where we started 2 years ago. You're all smiling, happy. You all have dark hair, and now we've been in the trenches for a few years, and we're just going to look back a little bit. This one isn't on, Cindy, but okay, right here, far right. All right. This board, looking back over 2 years, took action on several resolutions, actually 16 in 2012, and in 2013, 27 resolutions. These were actual action items of the board. And this year, we've had 4 considered and approved. Looking back on those resolutions, I tried to categorize them into different categories, and the board has taken a very strong position on policy issues over the past 2 years. You've taken certain steps, and I'm going to go through a couple of these in terms of leadership development as a priority of the board. You've made significant strides, I believe, financially over the past 2 years. You've taken a stand on economic development issues in St. Croix County that have furthered economic development in our county. You've taken strong positions on public safety. And lastly, probably most importantly, you have made great strides in terms of addressing long-standing capital improvement items that had been sitting for years. And I'll run through these quickly. Policy versus operational. I think this is the first board. When I was hired in June of 11, that was midterm of the first board. So you are the very first full-term, 2-year term board with a county administrator, and ongoing support of the policy versus operational issue. And I'll be the first one to say that sometimes that gets a little gray. It gets gray for me and it gets gray for the board, but I think this board has made a concerted effort to focus on policy issues, both at the board level and at your committee level. And it's an ongoing work in progress, I will say that, for all of us. But I think this board has made great strides in that effort. You amended the rules and bylaws early on in your term that clarified those roles, and you made significant changes to the rules and bylaws in your first year in office. You also conducted a citizen survey, and the results of that survey have been used to amend and progress the overall strategic plan of the county. Some of the feedback that we got from the citizen survey were used to redefine our strategic initiatives at the county, and those are continuous improvement, growth management, safety and health, and outreach. And those are high, lofty, initiatives, but everything we do as a staff, as a management team, as department heads and supervisors and managers, we try to revisit this and say, what are we doing here and how does this fit within the board's strategic initiatives? So although it looks good on paper, I want you to, as board members, be reassured that it's being applied, or we try to apply it day in and day out. Leadership development is another category that you have made some progress in. You established organizational stability and continuity by reaffirming your commitment to the county administrator form of government and approving a 4-year extension of the county administrator's employment agreement, which includes performance objectives, goals, which the new board, and hopefully many of you returning, will revisit in June of 2014 to see what kind of progress we're making on those goals that this board, established. And you established, as part of that, part of the goals is to continue to develop leadership skills for your county department heads and staff supervisors. Financially, you've approved 2 budgets, the 2013 budget and the 2014 budget. Both of them had zero increases in controllable levy and have redefined the use of the general fund. You've continued the implementation at a great level for pay for performance. You stuck by your word. When we first went into pay for performance, there were some that said the board will never continue to support this, either through funding or through just policy governance support. You have done that by committing funds for both the 2013 and 2014 budget to continue implementation of pay for performance. You have also made commitments towards capital improvements, both in the 2013 and 2014 budget. The 2014 budget had a $228,000 reduction in expenditures over the 2013 budget. We had a 1% increase in healthcare costs. You reduced the nursing home levy from the 2013 budget to 2014 from a levy support of $333,000 to less than $57,000 tax levy support in the 2014 budget. That wasn't done with, that wasn't easy. There were sacrifices made and changes that were implemented, including the food service issue, which we dealt with in the budget, but that made great strides towards bringing that levy down, and also the work of the staff as well. You also committed almost $1 million towards continuing capital improvements in 2014. So you really walked the talk, and you committed where county boards have their greatest authority over the operation, and that is the establishment and control of that budget, which you've done. You made steps towards the sale of county assets, which was an issue early on. We are continuing to look at vacant parcels of land or assets that the county, as a board, you decide whether or not we have need for. We brought proposals to the board, and you approved the sale of the Emerald Tower site. We sold some government center property and 552 acres of vacant farmland. You've approved the transition of St. Croix Industries to private provider. That's an ongoing project as we speak. You took a position on a nursing home. We have information into the state on the property incentives, so that will come back to the county board, but you did take a position on that. You've updated the county's fund balance policy, created a risk reserve for health and human services, and have directed staff that the sale of assets need to be applied to the retirement of county debt if possible. And you've declared your intent to reimburse the general fund with bond proceeds for capital projects, which is significant. Economic development, another priority of this board, which you should take credit for, is that we have increased financial support to the Economic Development Corporation, Bill Rubin's operation. We changed the funding formula for that, and this board supported it. You have provided financial support to the Bridge Coalition, and the bridge is being built. A lot of that work took place before you came into office, but you kept it going. So take credit for it. You've approved a resolution advocating mass transit and multimodal transportation improvements in the county. And significantly, with Ellen's help and her staff, you've updated the comprehensive plan, which has an economic development component in it. Public safety, you've approved a resolution urging our legislators to vote to improve our highways and safety on our roads. You've adopted an all-hazard mitigation plan. You've established a criminal justice collaborating council, and we've hired our first coordinator. Travis Getz is here this morning. I'd like to introduce him to the board. Some of you have met him. Stand up, Travis. Travis comes to us from Eau Claire County, where he worked in probation, and Travis is the first St. Croix County Criminal Justice, Community Justice Collaborating Council Coordinator. So welcome, Travis. He's been on the job a couple weeks now, and He's learning the ropes. Thanks, Travis. You've approved a resolution to conduct a feasibility study to consolidate with Pierce County, our 911 centers. That is going through the committee process, and we'll be back before the county board, a new board, probably in April or May. Again, as I've mentioned, you've made huge strides towards capital improvements in St. Croix County. The board, a prior board back in October of 2010, directed the county to vacate Health and Human Services as soon as practical. But you, as a board, took that on, approved the sale of the vacant farmland to begin the process of funding capital improvement projects in St. Croix County, which was a jump start to much needed projects. And that land was sold in February of 2013 and provided the impetus for funding capital improvements. Now you can see the fruit of your labor, the fruit of your work. This is the new 911 center downstairs. As I've said, we'll have a grand opening on April 15th from 4 to 6, and you should be there, and you should take pride in that. It's a state-of-the-art 911 center. I would say one of the best in the state, and it's not done. I mean, we're still working on it, and phase 2 will include the replacement of all the infrastructure, and then we will begin work. We have begun work on the new EOC across the hall. As I said, we're still working through the feasibility study to consolidate the two 911 centers. The Public Protection Committee will take this up again March 21st, and Pierce County will take it up March 25th. This is an artist's rendering of the St. Croix County Services Center in New Richmond, which you approved. You approved the purchase of the facility, the old county market, and you approved a budget of approximately $4.5 million to retrofit this building for St. Croix County to meet long-term health and human services needs in St. Croix County. Long-term solution to a long-standing problem, and you dealt with it. That's the picture of the building. That canopy will come off. It'll be off by the end of this week. And then there's a picture of Fred and I and the superintendent on the site. I think Fred's asking where the hot tub's going to go. He said it's not in the plans. This is the mezzanine removal. Mezzanine. Come on, guys. Smile. Wake you up. The mezzanine removal. And that is the front entrance. And then you can see the actual building has been gutted, and the steel stud work is actually going in for framing in the offices. There's the budget. You've seen that multiple times. And you've seen this multiple times, but that's what got it going. You approved the sale of the land, and that got the projects moving forward. We've talked about future bonding needs. That'll come before the board in middle of 2014. Some of you, hopefully a lot of you, will be here to take that up. Timeline for bonding. We've made other capital improvement accomplishments, or you have as a board, and there's a list of those. We've reviewed those. And you've established goals for the county administrator when you approved the extension of the employment agreement and commitment to the county administrative form of government. You established goals for me and the staff, and we're making progress on these goals, and I'll be prepared to report in June where things stand on the development of a capital improvement plan, progress towards intergovernmental and public-private partnerships, regionalized services, and the implementation of a leadership development program for department heads and supervisors, which we've been doing. Trying to develop a strong culture of leadership here at St. Croix County, develop meaningful department and individual goals, tie that to performance. We have challenges which we will continue to address. This is not easy work. It's not for the faint of heart, but you as a board have gotten behind it, and the staff has taken it to heart, and we're getting it done. It takes teamwork, and we're trying to make sure that departments don't work in silos anymore. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Could you tell us where you see the possibilities of progress for intergovernmental cooperation, consolidation, coordination, and so on, in addition to the possible 911 center consolidation?
In terms of,
Have
Wait.
you found any other things working? Are there things going on
we've
from that one?
there's a group that have looked at various ways counties, cities, villages can share services. We made progress towards joint purchasing with the school district and with the city of Hudson. We're looking at some shared equipment use rather than highways and street departments and public works going out and purchasing large pieces of equipment. We're looking at potentially shared use of equipment, the shared purchase of fuel. We've worked with the school district and the city of Hudson on fuel purchasing. So yes, I mean, I'll outline that more as we move forward. But yes, we have a intergovernmental agency group that made up of staff from some of the towns, cities, and villages that meet to discuss these items. But it's not easy they're not easy projects to, as you see with the 911, that's a large scale consolidation of services, but it comes with a great deal of work and effort and willpower to merge certain operations. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat. Included in your legislative packet, excuse me, was the annual report from the Veteran Service Department. I commend that to your review and retention. That's the only one that was in our packet this month. Are there any questions at all or observations? Merlin is here if there's anything specific that you want to inquire. And if not, Merlin, we thank you very much for the good work that your department does and for your annual report. Thank you very much. Well, we're moving faster than I thought we would. Let's move right into the action items that we have in front of us this morning. We might be moving faster because we've only got half our group here today. The first item in front of us this morning, board members, is a resolution that comes from the Administration Committee, and this is the resolution to approve the highway wage grid. Chair would entertain a motion. Motion from Supervisor Malik, second from Supervisor York. Discussion. Supervisor Schachner.
Just a question on how the wage grid was established, because we've been with the last budget, we had issues with people lined up with proper wage, and it caused a lot of chaos. And we're looking at the cities for some jobs and the cities have not, and I'm wondering what policy we followed for establishing these wage grids.
Good morning. The highway wage grid, we really utilized the wage grid that you already previously approved for non-exempt employees. And so we did analysis of the highway positions, how they relate internally to other types of positions for scope, responsibilities, and job requirements. I worked with the highway administration to kind of find like positions, because what we've really trying to do in this is to clean up the wages that we pay our highway employees. Previously, they were paid a lot of different rates depending on the type of vehicle that they may operate or drive that day, which makes things like payroll pretty difficult, and sometimes even hiring new employee hard to explain what their base rate is. So this places them onto a wage grid and combines some titles. So we reviewed it with the highway administration. We looked at internal comparables, and then we also met with some of the highway employees and kind of covered this for them, answered any questions that they had.
Supervisor York.
I just want to know, have the employees that this affects, have they bought into this? Do they feel it's a fair approach, and is there negativity? Is there resentment? What is there? Or are they buying in? I mean, I realize that's an opinionated question, but you do have to ask it, so.
You know, it would be somewhat speculative. What I could answer is that when we met with some of the union representatives that represent most of the employees, although there were a lot of questions and they needed a few more meetings to understand it, they seemed to feel that it was a fair and accurate way of placing them on to pay for performance. Because what this enables them to do is to now, if they earn it, have the opportunity for a base increase. Otherwise, they had no steps. There was only one rate of pay. So they really had no opportunity in our new system to advance if their performance warranted it. So between that and the fairness or the equity of treating them the same as we did, so the scope employees and the non-represented employees, so they're being implemented the exact same way as the previous ones, where they go to the nearest step that's no lower, as well as get that 3% offset. The feedback I've received is positive. When I've talked to Tim Ramberg and Jane Bond, the feedback they've received is positive from the employees, so.
You said that the payroll processing was going to be simplified. Is that, quantify that for us if you can?
Well, some of our systems, and they're a little bit different because they're on a Chem State system, but then it dumps into our countywide Alio system. But when they have to go into these time daily sheets and change people's rate of pay in and out, as well as we're eliminating things like special pays, shift pays. If you're on this certain beat, you get this pay. So really, you'll be recording the hours. They still have to allocate to the projects, but it will be easier because there's one base pay for an employee by their primary job.
Supervisor Peavy.
Can you explain how this wage grid fits with the state statute on prevailing wages for some of these projects?
Well, we reviewed that, but that will be an additional layer that they will continue to have to do that. So for certain jobs and certain projects, they'll need to compare to what we're paying comparative to prevailing wage. And so Tim Ramberg and Jane Bond have already identified those, and we'll still be subject to prevailing wage on those projects. And so at times, people could have to get paid that rate as opposed to this base rate, but that's been calculated into kind of their projects as they plan forward.
Thank you.
Supervisor Malik.
Will the definitions in this new pay system more closely match the definitions that are used in the prevailing wage analysis? Or does the prevailing wage analysis use the old type of equipment, special pay for this, special pay for that system?
I know there's a lot of work still being done on cleaning up kind of the prevailing wage system, and the highway office submits all of our paperwork to try to reflect that, but it's, you know, at a state level. So this takes that into account, and by combining some of the jobs, I think cleans it up a little bit, but there's probably still more work because everybody can still categorize titles, and it's not just, you know, public entities that are covered by that, so.
Supervisor Ring.
Could you quantify this prevailing wage issue? I mean, what percent of either time or payroll, so what happens with that is they're paid what the federal government requires them to be paid for certain, when they're working certain projects, federal government. what percent are we talking? 5%, 10? How often does this happen?
I'm looking at Tabitha in case she happens to know, because I would have to say it would really be a guess on my part, because it's really done outside of my job classification system. It's more a project-based system, and because they enter their payroll out there, I'm not really sure how many projects of ours on a regular basis fall under prevailing wage. I don't think it's a huge amount, but I don't know. I could find that out, but.
Any other questions? At this point, I'm going to have Corporation Counsel Cox address a stick above the water.
Okay. You may have noticed in the resolution that the notation is that it requires a 2/3 vote of the entire membership of the board, and since there are 19 members, that would require 13. Do the math, there aren't 13 people here. And the reason that it requires a 2/3 vote, because the resolution is proposing to spend unbudgeted funds to pay for that, and so therefore, this would constitute a budget amendment under Wisconsin statutes 6590 sub 5. There is a way around this. The way around it would be to strike the second paragraph. Be it further resolved that the funding to implement the highway pay plan and adjustments be transferred from the excess general fund sales tax revenue. If that paragraph is stricken, then the highway department in this instance would be required to pay for this within the existing funds of its budget. And in the event that it did not have enough funds, later action by the board to amend the budget or perhaps a contingency fund transfer by the administration committee would be necessary. So I think you can go forward and vote on this if you strike that second paragraph, which would implicate the highway department living within the means already budgeted.
What is the pleasure of the board?
I'm willing to offer that as an amendment.
I have an amendment from Supervisor, excuse me, amendment from Supervisor Malik to strike the language. Is there a second? Second from Supervisor York. Discussion on the amendment to strike the language. Supervisor Peavy.
How would the highway department know? I'm just thinking, there isn't money in the highway department budget to implement this wage grid. So I don't know if this is appropriate. Of course, Mr. Ramberg's not here this morning, but how would we propose to the highway department to operate when there is not money in the budget to fund it with this change?
Supervisor Malik.
It occurs to me that one way to do it would be to hire fewer people. Leave a job unfilled, that sort of thing. Do we have at this point any estimate of how much additional money this would cost the county in 2000?
The fiscal note says
Fiscal note.
92,000. I may address Supervisor Peavy. This would be a similar situation to the clerk of court's office or the sheriff's office or the district attorney's office absorbing costs during the course of the year for the Schaffhausen trial, which we knew was going to cost considerably, but we asked departments to absorb as much of that cost as possible, and then prior to the end of the year when we close the books, a transfer from the general fund or contingency fund can be made into the department. So my suggestion would be that this amendment go forward and that the highway department absorb as much of this cost as possible, but knowing full well that the general fund and contingency fund can supplement any overages that this may cause.
Additional discussion. Supervisor Attino.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, can you please give me the lines that we're looking at removing? Is it the second paragraph or line 22,
Line,
23?
it'd be line 22 and 23.
So it is 22, 23, thank
The
you.
very end of
That's
the
the way I understood it.
resolution. So
Thank you.
Supervisor. Additional discussion. Supervisor Ring.
I think that I'm going to vote in support of it. I just think it's good. We can take care of it. I don't want to put it on the backs of the employees. So I appreciate the amendment that was offered.
Is there additional discussion on the amendment? Just the amendment. That's where we're at. Supervisor Schachner.
I actually don't think, I personally would rather just table the whole thing until the next committee. And the amendment causes concern for me because we've already seen Highway Department have various parts of its budget under attack. And I would like just to hold off and pass the whole thing as is to verify it's funded versus, well, we might fund it at a future date.
Chair is confused. Are you expressing an opinion or are you offering a motion to table?
I am expressing an opinion with the intention to table after what the decision of this amendment. An opinion on what's going on.
Further discussion. Supervisor York.
Just a question, probably directed at Mr. Cox or Pat. Does it make any sense then to put a cap on the general fund, you know, if you had to fund this thing outside of the amount that you presented of, what, 92,000?
Approximately.
Does it, I mean, is it restrictive to put a cap on it, or what would you suggest in that area? I mean, I know you're giving us your best guess, but, you know, you don't want this thing to be 150 grand either, or just a wild and free floating number. So I realize it's your best guess.
You could say not to exceed.
I would offer that the calculations have been run with the exact employees and their outcomes, so assuming there isn't a lot of turnover or some major change, which actually would probably cause it to go lower, it's a reasonable estimate for that. Now, if it gets delayed, then we have to calculate in all that one change retro pay for employees and delaying all of that because it's written March 16th. If it's not processed till May, it complicates the highway in terms of their billing projects. So the retro would have some bigger impacts for them. I understand what you're saying, Travis. But.
Additional discussion on the amendment. Supervisor Hood.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the amendment. We've done the work. They're expecting the pay grid. This is something that I think can easily be handled in the admin committee.
There are special rules about contingency transfers. We will look to see whether it can be done after today, whether it can be done in the administration committee. It may very well be possible that that's the case.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Are you, Supervisor Peavy?
Yeah, just to follow up on one of the comments of not hiring staff, with the winter we've had, you can realize that every man is driving a truck that can possibly, that CDL license. So the option of not hiring people, I don't think is a reality when we've had a winter like this in the summer that's going to follow with the road breakups. So I just want to make everybody aware that that's probably not a doable thing to have less staff. The contingency fund is a fine example of how we could fund this in the future, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Are you ready to proceed on voting on the amendment? Board members, the motion that is in front of us, the question that we are considering is an amendment to strike the language in the resolution which would be the final two lines. That is on a motion by Supervisor Malik. Amendment is seconded by Supervisor Yorg. Are you ready? Is his second in?
Yes.
Proceed to vote, and this is the amendment only.
Passed 8-3.
And the amendment is approved. And we now have in front of us, the question before the body is an amended resolution. The resolution in front of you now reads as presented with the striking of the final two lines. Discussion on the amended resolution. Are you ready to vote?
Fred, I need your second.
At this point, this is presented to us on a motion by Supervisor Malik, second by Supervisor Yorg again. You ready to vote? Board members, proceed to vote on the amended resolution. And the resolution is adopted. The next resolution, action item for our consideration this morning is a resolution to approve the nursing home wage grid. This also is a resolution that comes to us from the admin committee. Chair would entertain a motion. Motion by Supervisor Ring, second by Supervisor Hood. Discussion. The issue is the same.
Actually, I don't believe the issue. I thought it was when I entered the two-thirds vote in the IQM2. But my understanding in talking to Ms. Hanson is that this is not going to be paid out of sales tax revenue or unappropriated revenue. And the line is not actually in the resolution, so therefore this only requires a majority vote.
Thank you, Corp Counsel. Discussion on the question. Supervisor Ring.
I think this resolution and the previous one, he wants.
Can I take it back?
Want to rewind the tape?
We'll come right back to you.
Okay.
Supervisor Ring has the floor.
Yes, I just think these are both, they were part of a broader plan.
Yes, they were.
To bring every group up, and I think that's important that we really considered this over the last several months.
That's
And
right.
it's just part of making it right for all the employees and fair.
Thank you, Supervisor. Corporation Counsel?
Well, I don't think I'm going to rewind. Although it's in the fiscal note, it's not contained within the resolution, so therefore, if it's not contained in the resolution, they would have to live within their budget, and therefore, in my opinion, it only requires a majority vote.
Thank you, Corporation Counsel. As a learned attorney, you have found us an expeditious way for us to proceed. And I thank you. Discussion on the resolution. Supervisor Schachner.
I just have a question. So basically, the last resolution and this resolution, they might be coming to like the admin committee for the contingency funds then, I guess is the question. Because of the excess, and like it was said in the last one, we had to remove something, and this one doesn't have that, and I'm just confused on where the extra money's gonna come from then within their
Well,
budgets.
the extra money will come from somewhere, but because the resolution doesn't specify in the body of the resolution that it's coming from a source outside of the appropriation of the budget, it therefore constitutes a resolution requiring only a majority vote.
Any additional discussion on the question in front of us? If not, we will proceed for consideration of the question. Are you ready for?
Yes,
Yeah, the second is from Hood.
bring it in.
The question in front of us is the resolution to approve the nursing home wage grid. This is unamended, so the vote on the question is as presented in front of us. Board members, proceed to vote.
Andy? Carried unanimous.
And the resolution is adopted unanimously. The next resolution is a resolution establishing compensation for elected officials for years 2015 through 2018. There are two of the constitutional officer positions that are up for election prior to papers being taken out and circulated. Compensation for those positions must be set in advance of that. The resolution identifies the action taken by the Administration Committee. Chair would entertain a motion. Motion from Supervisor Ring, second by Supervisor Brinkman. Discussion. Supervisor Peavy.
Yeah, just for clarification, whereas number 19 states that total annual compensation, is that meant to include fringes and all that, or is that just the base salary?
Negative, that is the base salary.
Thank you.
Any additional compensation? I got compensation in the mind now, thank you. Any additional question, comment on the question in front of us? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to vote. This is on a motion by Supervisor Ring, second by Supervisor Brinkman. Supervisor Brinkman, have you entered your second?
Yes. Ready to go.
Board members, proceed to vote. And the resolution is adopted. I think, board members, this is a convenient time. We have dealt with the items dealing with compensation for us to take a very brief break. It is approximately 10 o'clock. Let's stand informal for a period of 10 minutes, and then we'll proceed with the remainder of our agenda. Board members, let's reassemble.
Are you gonna say anything about Dwayne? This is last.
Board members, our next question for consideration is a resolution designating the Health and Human Services Department as the administrating agency for the Coordinated Services Team Initiative. Now, there is a mouthful. This comes to us from the HHS Board. Chair would entertain a motion. Supervisor Hood, second by Supervisor Larson. Discussion. Goodness. I take your body, Supervisor Hood.
Well, just by way of explanation from the HHS board, this is really providing the same services. It's just supposedly and hopefully, from what we were presented, a way to do it in a way that's just more collaborative. And it just made more sense. I mean, it got good discussion and was presented well at the HHS committee, and so it just made sense. This was something that we all agreed on it, so I think it came unanimously from the HHS committee.
Any additional discussion? Supervisor Ring.
Could I just get an example of the coordination, what was before, what it will be after? Is this cost saving? Is it service, improved service? What, help us understand it better.
Committee member wish to respond to that, or Supervisor Hood?
There may be cost savings. Hopefully there will be some cost savings, but really just providing better service and collaborative work, coordinating work. But there may be some cost saving as well, at least that was the way it was presented. I wish there was somebody that was more that if Fred were here or something, he could explain it more, but yeah, there may be some, but can't guarantee it.
It's more for clients that have either adults or children in multiple programs in the department, whereas before they were being dealt with individually for each specific program, and the state is recommending and providing grant dollars for counties that provide a more coordinated approach towards the delivery of human services. So, you know, if you have family members that are in multiple programs, someone at the department is going to oversee that and know that either kids or adults are in multiple programs, and so that there will be some crossover training amongst staff and a more coordinated provision of services. And that's the whole intent of this. And the state is providing grant dollars to do that, but to be eligible for those grant dollars, the county board has to approve a resolution that says we support the CST, Coordinated Services Team.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Supervisor Hood?
Yeah, and the resolution, it just, what it is it makes the Health and Human Services Department the administrating agency for it. So that's really what the resolution does. It's just saying, okay, yeah, this should fall under the HHS board.
Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, I believe you're ready to vote. This comes to us on a motion from Supervisor Hood, second by Supervisor Larson. Are you ready with this? You are entered. Board members proceed to vote on the question, which is the resolution number 4. And the resolution is adopted unanimously. Board members, the next question in front of us is an ordinance to repeal and recreate Chapter 2, the Records Retention of St. Croix County Code of Ordinances, with the adoption of the Wisconsin Public Records Board Records Retention Disposition Schedule. This comes to us from the Administration Committee. Chair would entertain a motion. Motion from Supervisor Ring with a second from Supervisor Schachner. Any questions or comments on this rather detailed proposal in front of us? Supervisor York.
Not having total awareness of this, is this a housekeeping, updating thing that we're doing here? I mean, I guess briefly in summation, please.
Well, yes, it's probably a little bit more than that. In fact, I'm going to have Corporation Counsel respond to this. There are certain statutory requirements and county requirements in terms of record retention, and I'm going to have Corporation Counsel respond to that.
Sure, I think you can classify it as a housekeeping matter, plus some background. The records retention law, the county's required to keep records for certain statutory periods. If there's not a specific statutory period, then the default period is 7 years. Counties are authorized to have retention schedules pursuant to Chapter 59. Those retention schedules expire and they have to be approved by the Public Records Board. Those retention schedules expire every 10 years. Our record retention schedule is going to expire in June of this year. In 2010, a group of people from various counties got together and created a model schedule for all counties. Counties have the option of adopting that in total, and they would not have to go through the formal review process by the actual board. So what we're doing here is adopting the model schedule, which has already been approved by the Public Records Board, and then it would go in effect and replace the existing records retention schedule under Chapter 2.
Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, I believe you're ready to vote. I am going to need a second in from Supervisor Schachner, and you are ready to proceed. The question in front of us is resolution number 5, which is the retention schedule. This is on a motion by Ring, second by Schachner. Board members proceed to vote. And the resolution is adopted unanimously. The next question for our consideration is the resolution adopting the rules and bylaws of the Board of Supervisors. There are certain consolidations that have been done as we have taken some actions over the past year, and this brings those to one approval. It's my understanding that adoption of rules and bylaws requires a 2/3 vote, and so before I introduce this, I'm going to turn to Corporation Counsel and ask where we're at, since we have a quorum but not a 2/3.
Well, I'm not going to ask where is everybody, but under the board rules, the modification of the board rules requires a 2/3 vote. That requirement can be suspended by a 2/3 vote of the board present. If the rules are then suspended, you could vote on the amendment to the rules and pass them. So the sequence would be to put the matter on the floor, motion to pass it in second, and if you wanted to go forward in adopting the rules today, you would have to suspend the rules in order to effectively pass them.
Chair is in concurrence with Corporation Counsel, but the irony I saw before is that in order for us to proceed, we would need to suspend the rules to adopt the rules, and that just seems somewhat ironic to me. So before we proceed, I would like a sense from the board as to the desire of the board under these circumstances. So I'm not calling for any motion, Chair would like a sense of where the board is at before we proceed down a parliamentary route that I can traverse, but I'm not wanting to do it if we don't want to go there. Supervisor York.
So if we just say, let's carry this over to the next meeting, I mean, which some of us might not be here, but whatever, it's really just a procedural thing to address it, than having what is required, rather than maybe appearing to bend the rules to do this thing, which I don't want to do.
Supervisor, I would only disabuse the word bend. There is a clear parliamentary route that we can traverse appropriately. Chair is just simply wanting to know the sense of the board before we would begin to go that route.
I would like to
Supervisor
carry over.
Schachner.
I just have a question on, would this be brought up at the next meeting in April, which is our operational lineup meeting?
The
or would it be in
organizational
May?
meeting. It would need to be on the agenda at the organizational meeting because
Okay.
there would need to be rules and bylaws for the
in
board.
place. Okay, I just wanted to know when it would be in place, and I'm with Supervisor York.
Supervisor Malik.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's anything in here that would affect the process of the organizational meeting.
You are correct. We can proceed with the organizational meeting.
I think there's a very good argument to carry it forward, in part because it can be a part of a learning process for the new members on the board. Assuming there are some new people, it's hard to get people to bore into the boring rules and bylaws. But if there's a genuine reason to do it, because there's a pending change, then they will do it. And I think that'll be salutary for the sake of the new, that'll be a good thing for the sake of the new members as well. So besides the argument already made that I don't like the precedent of using this parliamentary maneuver here to get around a 2/3 requirement.
I absolutely take your point, Supervisor Malik. Just for the record, I would also disabuse the use of the word maneuver. There is a clear path to do this, and I have the sense from the board that you wish not to do that, to lay this over to the next meeting, and we'll take it up then. And with that being said, Chair is not going to entertain a motion on this item, and we will proceed without consideration. Supervisor Malik.
I'd like to make two more points. You and I have been on this board for a long time. You some 10 terms and me 9 terms, and this has never been proposed before that we should use this parliamentary method. So the idea that we would be setting precedent is, to my mind, very significant. The other thing is that for those who might be on the new board, I don't think they should be especially dismayed at the April organizational meeting if somebody proposes then to table the changes to the rules and bylaws 1 month so they can get used to it and study it. That would not be a disaster either, because there's nothing in here that is that critical that I can see, at least, for the very takeoff of the new board. And so, but that organizational meeting is often, sometimes it's the very first time that people get together. They may not have been able to adjust their schedules to get to the training meeting beforehand, or there's just an awful lot to absorb in a short time. And so they may all hit the ground running and be ready to do it at the April organizational meeting, but if somebody isn't and wants to ask it to be tabled a month, I think those of you who are here ought to be open to that.
I think I have the clear sense of the board, and just to pick up on your comment, Supervisor Malik, and thank you for your comments. I want to make sure that not only with the board members, but members of the public that are here and members of the public that will be viewing this, we currently have rules and bylaws. They are in place. This does not mean that we do not have rules and bylaws. What was the consideration in front of us, the potential consideration this morning, was to codify some amendments and changes that we have done during the year at one time into the new concise rules and bylaws. So we can proceed expeditiously, as the supervisor indicated, with our organizational meeting and adopt them then or at a later date. And when they are adopted, they will become the new and revised rules and bylaws. Okay, enough of that. Let's proceed then to the resolution authorizing the St. Croix River Crossing Growth Management Mitigation Funds to purchase countywide LiDAR data. And for those of you that don't know what LiDAR is, that will be explained in a minute. The chair will not do that. Well, we'll defer that to the committee, even though chair doesn't know what that is. Motion will be accepted. Motion by Supervisor Ring and a second by Supervisor Brinkman. Discussion. Madam Chair, do you wish to address this since this comes from the CDC committee?
Yes, we've talked about this in the past. So the LiDAR that we've talked about is light imaging detection and radar data and analysis. And basically what that provides countywide is 2-foot contours of mapping that. The great advantage of that with all the changes in land uses, this is going to be a very accessible tool to local units of government, state units of government, to private developers who can use this as the foundation for, development processes, for, natural resource protection processes. Just it's a great tool. I think the committee is quite excited about the opportunity to do it. The cost of this, we've looked and gotten good cost rates. It's something that other counties in the area are doing. We've worked out with the provider that we get a good cost because we're doing it jointly with others. But the total cost is about $165,000. We have other sources of funding. So what we're asking of you today is one piece of that funding, which is $30,000. And the source of that fund is we're asking for that to come out of the community development, or not the community development, but the St. Croix Rivers Crossing Growth Management Mitigation Funds. So this has been included in the budget, so we're looking for support.
Additional discussion or comments? Supervisor Hood.
We have the same problem with this resolution that this requires a budget amendment. because the funds that are to be authorized for use was not appropriated in the budget, and there's not a way for the board to pass this today.
Not to get into a back and forth here, this is only
Right.
a question. These are funds that are part of the mitigation dollars.
Right.
Under which we are the fiscal agent. So those dollars have already been provided to the county. My chair is only confused about your indication of budgeted funds, which would seem to indicate county funds.
Well, I think it's my opinion that these are county funds once the county's going to spend the funds. The finance director has indicated to me that they are considered county funds, and the funds were not budgeted for in the 2014 budget.
So your advice to this board then is specifically,
Would be to postpone this matter until next month.
Is timing critical?
Supervisor Ring?
I'd ask you to ask Community Development Director. I'm not sure that,
We have a contract to have the flight done in April. The product will be delivered in the fall, and that's when we would pay the bill. So we have time to put it together, but the contract, the flight will be done. So, and we have the majority of the money. We have 2 grants already and money budgeted in part of the county's budget under land records. So at this point, I would like to go forward with that contract and have the flight done in April. But I'm not sure that I can or can't when there's that 30,000 missing.
Could I follow that up?
Supervisor Malik?
The money on hand is enough for the flight, do I understand?
It's a contract for the whole project. It's, $155,000. It's not separated in parts, so.
If we were to cancel, we'd have to pay for the services already incurred.
Correct.
For example, nobody's talking about canceling, but that's our bare minimum responsibility. After the flight is made, we'd have to pay for the flight. So the question is, do we have enough money? Typically, the flight part of it is significant, but not the majority.
Correct.
Sounds like it could wait, although it's not pleasant, but then it's not pleasant to have less than the majority present.
Board members, here where we're at, we have advice from Corporation Counsel that we not proceed with consideration of this for the reason that was indicated. At this point, we do have a main motion and a second. So the question is owned by the body, and we're going to need to dispose of that in one way or another. So at this point, we're still in discussion. I'm going to allow discussion before we figure a way to get out of this. Supervisor Schachner.
I'm trying to remember the proper wording. Could we move to postpone until the next meeting?
That
To
would
move
be
the
an
table?
appropriate motion.
All right, then I would,
Is that your motion?
yes.
We have a motion from Supervisor Schachner to postpone this question until the next, are you talking about the organizational meeting or the next legislative meeting of this body?
It would have to be the next legislative meeting.
Well, no, we could take it up at the April meeting.
Okay, then I would say at the
Is
next.
that your
yep,
intention?
Yep, as soon, it would be the intention to do it
Motion
as
to
soon as
postpone
possible.
until the next regular meeting of the county board. Is there a second? Second from Supervisor York. Yes. Discussion on the motion to postpone to a date specific. Seeing none, I believe you're ready to vote. Is your second in, Supervisor? The question in front of us is the motion to postpone this resolution to a date specific, which is the next regularly scheduled meeting of the county board, which will be the organizational board meeting the third Tuesday in April. Proceed to vote. And the motion to postpone to a date specific is adopted. And that appropriately and parliamentary disposes of the item that was in front of us. Just make sure we don't get ourselves wrapped around the axle here. Number 8. An ordinance repealing Chapter 17, Subchapter 11, Section 17, 2517.35 of the Shoreland zoning. And I will not read in its entirety the remainder. This is affectionately known as the Shoreland zoning ordinance. This comes to us on a resolution approving approval from the Community Development Committee. Chair will entertain a motion from Supervisor Ring with a second from Supervisor Brinkman. Discussion. Any comments that you wish to make, Madam Chair?
Yes, I'd just like to provide a little background about the work. This ordinance, the overall intent of this ordinance is to update zoning, our zoning related to shorelands and shorelands, wetlands. So rivers, ponds, and wetlands are affected. So the overall intent of this is to, improve water quality, fish and wildlife habitat, and the natural scenic beauty related to these waters. So this has been in the works. There's a state, the state has what is NR 115, which we have to adopt. And we've spent time just adopting it, and we can make changes to be more restrictive. So the staff for about a year has been working on this. They've gotten input from DNR. We've had 2 public hearings. The second public hearing was in part due to suggestions that DNR made about putting in place mitigation factors for when, property owners come and look at, they want to make some changes that we wanted to tie down. What is the mitigation process that we would use to approve or deny those requests? I think what's important to know is that this has been, this is the first substantive change since 1968, so it's over 40 years. There's been input for that state ordinance from people all over the state. I think our staff just put a lot of work into it during the 2 public hearings, and just in between, they've gotten input from surveyors and other people who see these land use requests and development requests all the time. So one thing we learned is about 2% of the land area in St. Croix County is water. And when we talk, I think all of us talk about quality of life and protecting natural resources. This is the tool that we in St. Croix County can use to do that. So the approach, one of the things, just in an overview, that we think this is a better, it's a better approach in the past, because it's based on, I think in the past there were, so what we look at is how will setbacks, land disturbances, impervious surfaces, and vegetative cover, how are those changed? So our approach this approach of this ordinance is to have more flexible and site-specific mitigation efforts that would match the impacts caused by whatever improvement or development that's proposed. So I think it's just more, you can make site-specific improvements that make sense for that individual parcel. So just as an overview, I think we think it's a good process. We did have the input that we got was positive. I think the staff was very responsive to DNR's input and the input of others. So other members of the committee may have more input, but that would be my overview.
Supervisor Hood.
I went to the last public hearing that they had the other day, and so I appreciate, a number of the supervisors are here, and you all have voted to approve it, and I appreciate the work of the staff and the committee on that. I just have a couple questions. So one of the things that you could gain points for your mitigation of a non-conforming property was if you painted, let's say you want to put a second floor on your old cabin by the lake, and you could gain a point by painting it earth tone colors or something. That just seems to be kind of an overreach by government to me. Granted, I don't want to see a great big pink or purple house by the lake either, but are we really going to get into the business of saying, well, that green is earth tone, but that other green that you want really is just a little bit too bright? Those sorts of things concern me, and that's in the ordinance, right? The other thing is, since we have the Board of Adjustment gentleman here, one of the things that Ellen brought forward was that it would actually make it easier for someone who has a non-conforming property to make it conforming, to mitigate the things, so that we wouldn't automatically have the Board of Adjustment just say, well, no, you can't build it, or you can't modify it. Is that, Buck, what you think from this ordinance? It would make it easier for people with non-conforming properties to find some way around it rather than just getting a no from the Board of Adjustment?
Mr. Chairman,
I again
do agree with
remind you, questions need to be directed this way, but before we get into that, the department head does have a very brief presentation that may answer some of those questions. Again, I want to test the sentiment of the board. Do you wish to see that brief presentation from the department head, or do you simply want to have the dialogue here? Supervisor Malik, then I'll call on you for a response.
My impression is that obviously the topics dealt with are very similar to the topics we deal with in the Riverway under its special ordinance, its special NR 118, not 115, the regulation for the St. Croix Riverway from St. Croix Falls to Prescott for that part of the St. Croix River. The topics dealt with in this ordinance are very similar to the topics dealt with there. Not identical, but similar. The particularly that set of mitigation, that list is also characteristic of the way the Board of Adjustment here and in other municipalities along the Wisconsin side or the Minnesota side of the St. Croix River in that reach of the river have to approach their questions, their decisions. It is possible for a Board of Adjustment to simply say no. And they always have to say, in order to be procedurally correct and survive a legal challenge, they have to say why they're saying no. But they don't have to go beyond that to say in addition or instead or it could be approved if it had these 7 things. And that is the kind of work that is hard for boards of adjustment to do, to craft a list of mitigating factors that's pertinent for that property. You can imagine how it not only is it hard to think of the right solutions, but it's also kind of a silly exercise if the applicant hasn't indicated an openness to discussion about those things. For instance, supposing that a Board of Adjustment were willing to say, if you would change the color of this white house to a gray that matches the granite next to it, then we'd be able to approve your changes. How do they even open that discussion? Sometimes they don't, and sometimes boards of adjustment simply say no because it's less than an XYZ buffer strip or whatever the rule requires. So certainly to the extent that this ordinance has a set of topics and some suggested weights to be assigned to them, it's a step forward, a significant step forward. I don't think that it would make much difference for the decisions that St. Croix County makes because we are blessed with a very qualified staff. We have a history of dealing with many requests for changes so that we have lots of experience and we have lots of, they're not really precedents because one board doesn't bind another, but we have examples from our history of things that have come out through dialogue with the applicant and the board or the staff and the applicant to draw upon. But take a municipality, often a smaller municipality that doesn't have much experience, doesn't have ready staff, let's say they're paying an engineering firm to provide their staff work. And so every hour of staff work is costing them another $150 or whatever it may be. They may be inclined, and this is like the argument I made about Forest, the town of Forest, so unsuccessfully previously. It's a hard thing to get it right, and it's difficult when it's costing at every step. And so this ordinance, it's not throwing the protection of our tourism industry and our valuable natural resources to the wind, but it is providing a set of topics in this mitigation list with suggested weights, or mandatory weights, I guess, but it's providing those things that should be very helpful. So I'm sorry if I've taken too long, I probably have, but the short answer is yes.
Supervisor Peavy.
Yeah, I guess I got to put on my other hat. On the ag community, I read this, I don't know, 5, 6 times, and I'm still not clear what the impact is on the ag community on wetlands. Now, this is not just shoreland, and I understand we're talking about cabins on the lake and on the river, but I'm really not sure what the ag community can do or can't do on a wetland. And a wetland is defined by the DNR is quite possibly tilled, farmed, 9 years out of 10, or a waterway going through the field that 9 years out of 10 you hay the sides, but maybe the 10th year you can't, and you clean up, you cut the trees. So my concern is I'm not clear actually what the ag community can do with wetlands. And there's some exceptions in here, but they still don't, I just don't clarify what is allowed, not allowed. Thank you.
Well, with that, Supervisor, I think we will have some of our professional staff try and respond specifically to your questions. Ellen?
Thank you. I have with me Tammy.
I have with me Tammy Whitmer. She is our Planning and Land Conservation Specialist who did a great deal of the work on the Shoreland Ordinance in conjunction with the rest of our staff. And to answer your question, Bill, and I am glad you asked it because we actually had a significant discussion, and I can honestly say that I said to the staff, I know Bill will be asking questions about the impact on agriculture. And so we made sure we had a very thorough discussion about it to make sure. And I will rely on Tammy to supplement what I have to say, but basically what these new districts do is make no changes to agricultural practices. What we added as far as additional requirements on shoreline wetlands is for principal structures, okay? So if you're farming and doing agricultural activities in the shoreline wetland or inland wetland districts, it does not impact by these new changes. Only principal structure standards are affected. Tammy, can I add anything?
I would just offer too that wetlands aren't just regulated by St. Croix County. Wetlands are covered under state statutes, so Wisconsin DNR regulates wetlands, and so does the Federal Corps of Engineers. So again, our ordinance is going to handle that structure setback, but not to undermine that we still have underlying ordinances or regulations that do cover them. So is A exempt? Not completely, because there's other agencies that regulate them.
But this ordinance doesn't change the regulations for agricultural practices. Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, thank you. And any farmer is used to working under FSA and ASCS, and I just wanted to make sure that this one didn't put another layer that farming had to deal with, and I thank you for your reply.
You're welcome.
Any additional discussion? Seeing none, I believe you're ready to vote. The question before us is number 8, which is the shoreland zoning ordinance and adoption changes. This comes to us on a motion from Supervisor Ring, second by Supervisor Brinkman. Andy is your second in. Board members, proceed to vote on number 8. and the question is adopted unanimously. Ellen, why don't you remain? Number 9 is a response to an issue that came up at a previous board meeting. This was a proposal that was made by a board member. It was appropriately referred to a standing committee for consideration with the response back within a defined time period. That response is in front of us. This is not an action item, nor is it a discussion item, but it is a report that has been distributed. Either Ellen or committee chair, do you have any comments that you wish to make with respect to the report on limiting free plastic bags in St. Croix County?
I think this is.
Supervisor Ring.
Based on the request from Supervisor Malick, the staff did prepare the report that was in your packet. And we had a discussion at the Community Development Committee meeting. So as you see in the report, we're not recommending a resolution that was requested, and that was specifically that no retailer shall provide free plastic bags except for the original packaging for customer purchases. The discussion basically went to, rather than take it almost is a punitive approach, what the staff is suggesting, and I think what we see is the value and the overall work that's done with recycling in the county. And I think it woke us up to the fact that, there is a major recycling effort in the county. And what we saw this proposal as a sort of one-off, while it has merit, it's just taking one thing out of the whole big picture of things that we are recycling. And if we do something like this, that one, it should be more strategically looked at. Is that the biggest problem, or are we solving the smallest problem, or how much of a problem is it? So I think that was part of the discussion, that in the future, maybe a future committee look at that just more strategically and say, hey, what should we be doing? And so that's kind of where we landed, and where they're recommending a positive educational approach and working with local retailers to encourage more drop-off. So that's where it's at.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. This completes our Supervisor Malick.
Thanks to the committee, the committee chair, and the staff for this. I gather that it did not require a major allocation of resources to draw up this report, and that's a good thing. If I'm reelected, I'll probably come forward with something a little different, perhaps more strategic, perhaps larger. Certainly, I have only heard from one retailer, and that was a positive response. So if I had more time, I'd go out and contact some and see how they're thinking of it. I know your staff has attempted to set forth a model of how retailers think in St. Croix County, and without talking to them very much, that's probably the best that can be done, and that's why. But we have our daughter getting married on Saturday, and I've been preoccupied. But if I'm reelected, then we can talk about it again.
Thank you.
This is just fine for now.
Madam Clerk, do you have any reports of correspondence or rezoning requests?
I have no rezoning requests. I do have correspondence from Sheila Harsdorf. She thanks the board for sending a copy of the resolution for the additional funding, requesting support for additional funding for Assistant District Attorney drug prosecutor positions. She appreciates the board's input on this matter. She indicates, as you know, I share your concerns with prosecutor workload and authored an amendment to the state budget bill to increase a number of part-time assistant district attorney positions around the state to full-time positions, including one part-time position in St. Croix County. Additionally, given the tragic loss of life in our area due to the heroin epidemic that you cited, I am the Senate author for a package of bills seeking to help prevent future tragedies. Please be assured that I will keep the board's thoughts on these issues in mind as they come before the state senate. Thank you again for your interest and input on this issue. Feel free to contact me with additional comments, questions, or concerns.
Thank you. We do have some items of announcements. First of all, there has been distributed and is at each of your places a response to another question that was posed some time back and did necessitate a legal opinion from Corporation Counsel. That has been completed. This relates to the Hudson Area Joint Library. This is a detailed and lengthy opinion from Corporation Counsel. This is not an action item of any kind, nor is it a discussion item, but I would inquire of Corp Counsel if there are any summary comments that he wishes to make, and then I commend the opinion to you. Take it for your retention and certainly be familiar with what is in the opinion. Corporation Counsel.
The opinion addresses the issues that were made part of a motion by Supervisor Malik at the November meeting, asking first whether the county can rescind the approval of the Town of Hudson and Town of St. Joseph in the joint library, and number two, whether the county can recoup the reimbursement that it intends to pay for the joint library, not making up that difference in 2014 and perhaps future years. The opinion is long. My conclusions are right in front. So if you want to know what the answers are, my rationale is, and the history behind the issue is contained in the last 4 pages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A couple of other announcement items. Some of us will find these very germane, and some of us might not, depending on what happens on the 1st of April. I would remind the board that district meetings will be scheduled following the spring elections. The spring district meeting for our West Central WCA group will be in Eau Claire on Thursday, 24 April. So for those of us that will be returning, and I hope it is the majority of us, that will be the date scheduled for our district meeting. There also will be county official workshops, and I will commend these to especially newly elected board members, and more information on that will be coming. We have an orientation meeting that is scheduled, I believe, for the 10th, for 10 April, for newly elected board members and for returning board members. This will be a meeting, and you'll recall, somewhat similar to the one we had 2 years ago. I think that was not only interesting, but informative. I think the information that was presented by WCA and the attorneys, legal counsel that served the Wisconsin Counties Association was very helpful for board members to understand the roles and the differentiation between policymakers and micromanagers, and I think that was very helpful. So I also commend that. This is the last meeting of this board. This is the board that has a term from 2012 to 2014. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to work with all of you. It has been a singular personal privilege to be tasked with the opportunity to serve as your board chair. I've appreciated that very much, and I have appreciated the diligence and the hard work that all of you have brought to this task. So for those of us that will be back, I hope we can do equally good work in the board term from 2014 to 2016. And finally, as a matter of personal privilege and some emotion on behalf of my friend and my esteemed colleague, Mr. Larson, who sits here with me faithfully as vice chair. You are aware that recently Roger's wife, Marcella, went on ahead, and on behalf of Roger, I want to express his appreciation to the board for courtesies extended, for your your thoughts, your prayers, your cards. Roger wanted me to express that, and Roger, on behalf of all of us, our condolences and our sympathy to you. And with that, our meeting is concluded, and we are adjourned.